Hello and welcome back to the How the Race Was Won podcast. I'm Dane Cash, and I am here to talk bike racing with bike racing analyst extraordinaire. I think that's how you say it in French as well, right? I mean, that our word comes from that. Cosmo Catalano. I wonder how you say it in Quebecois French. I don't know how that's going to be different, but we get to talk about racing in North America today. How exciting
in my
is that?
time zone, in my own
in your
time
in
zone.
your time. It's not even that far away from you.
I will be going to Quebec next month for mountain bike racing, to cover mountain bike racing or take.
I would propose that you one day go to see road bike racing.
When my child requires less attention from his parents, I may in fact do that. Or I could bring him along with the grandparents, and they can go look at.
How old's your kid now?
He's 5. So I would not like to permanently hand over ownership of my child to another party. It's more that my wife would be mad if I went to Quebec and then Montreal and then went back to Quebec and Montreal. Also going to Lake Placid. So there's a lot of travel coming up, and my ability to capture content from road racing substantially more limited than it is to capture from mountain bike racing.
I see. Okay, good to know. So we had both the Grand Prix Cyclistes de Quebec, which was on Friday, and the Grand Prix Cyclistes de Montréal, which was today, Sunday. We're recording Sunday night. And both races, two of my favorite races every year. I've been to them several times, and I just absolutely loved going. And this year we got star power on the start list, as we so often do. These are races that really draw some big names to North America, and it's really great that if you're a North American fan, you get to see the likes of Tadej Pogacar at both of these races. We are going to break down the action from Quebec, and then we'll break down the action from Montreal. We'll talk a little bit about what it all means. We'll do some around the league to talk about what's been going on in the bike racing world outside of North America, even though in this one weekend, we do get to focus on North America, so that's what we're going to do most of the show. It's going to be a good show. Before we get any further, let me just really quickly say, head on over to escapecollective.com/member and sign up, if you haven't yet, to support this podcast and every other podcast on our network, because, I don't know, I want to keep doing them. I want to keep talking about bike racing in North America with bike racing analyst extraordinaire Cosmo Catalano. And if you already are a member, then just know how much we appreciate you, because I love talking bike racing with bike racing analyst extraordinaire Cosmo Catalano, and I know it's thanks to our members. So if you're a member, special thank you to you. You specifically, listener, thank you for being a member. Right, Cosmo. Let's talk Quebec first, because chronologically that's the race that happened first. What's the headline from the GP Quebec?
Michael Matthews knows his way around Quebec. Maybe that's how I should say it.
Ooh, that's good.
Because I was trying to, because it was actually a pretty interesting race. A lot of stuff happened. A lot of different pieces fell kind of oddly. It's a pretty active race. You know, there was a big early break that was away a lot of the day until around 40K to go when UAE started making things fast. We ended up with I think the gap dropped something like a minute and a half, 2.5 minutes between 40K and 25K. Decathlon and Soudal put kind of two guys in the mix in the no man's land there. And then around 15K to go, you had Jan Tratnik start attacking. In UAE, kind of every time they went up the hill in the course, they tried to make it hard. 10K, Matteo Jorgensen put in a really good solo, and then that lasted until about 3.5K to go, where Al Philippe made an attack. And then, for some reason, I think probably because Pogacar followed, Arnaud Delis also followed with Pogacar and some teammates. And they're in this big hyper-powered break. 2-3 kilometers to go. Pogacar cannot get rid of everybody. The break kind of falls apart and people looking at each other. The rest of the field is bearing down behind them. And two Lotto dudes go to the front and start their lead out from the breakaway. Very unusual. I think only like right outside of K to go. So actually, there are scenarios where this could have worked out for them, but it did not. They got caught by the field around 600K to go, or 600 meters to go. All of the Lotto people now very tired, including Delis. Pogacar finds his way to the front of the field and is looking over his shoulder like this is like a 3-up sprint, except there's, 50 dudes behind him. And finally, everybody, like it's Pogacar looking over his shoulder, everybody looking at Pogacar. Finally, Matthews just seems to lose his patience around just inside of 300 meters and just goes to the front and starts hammering. And you see all these guys kind of blow out across the road as they kind of find their way around people who aren't going to sprint or are slowing down. And they kind of come up behind him. You keep waiting for them, for this massive group of people you can see churning behind him to come around him. It just seems like he's on the front for like 20 or 30 seconds and no one gets by him. No one actually gets close. Like he salutes easily at the line. It was a really impressive win from a guy who's had some impressive wins in the past before.
So first of all, let's talk about this finish, because the finish itself, the geography of the finish is really interesting. And I actually really love this finish because of the way that it creates about 5 minutes of drama where you really don't know whether the riders who are going to the front are going to stay clear. The funny thing is they almost always don't, but it still feels like they might. And if you watch this race back, year in, year out, you see big names get to the front inside this final 2K, and you're like, are they going to stay clear? Is this going to be the year? And then they don't, but it feels like they might. And the thing is, this finish, basically the geography of the city and the way that this course goes, they are down by the water, by the St. Lawrence, until like 2-3K to go, and then they're sort of climbing all the way to the line. And at various points, it's a steeper climb or a more gradual, flatter section, but it's pretty much uphill from that, 2 to 3K to go mark all the way to the line. So that means you get in these last couple kilometers, they take longer to get to the finish than you think they're going to, because it is uphill. And yet, at the same time, the other side of the coin is it's not that steep. So Tadej Pogačar can't just drop everybody like you would expect him to on a harder climb. Spoiler alert, we'll get to that in a bit. And this finish, like the way that this works is you see riders attack and try to, steal a march on the sprinters, as they say. And Rigoberto Urán has done this. He, in the past, has managed to make that happen. He went a little later, I think, in the year that he did it, if I'm remembering correctly. But it just leads to this drama. And I think the headline that you chose was perfect, because Michael Matthews, having won this race, is now a 3-time winner. He sets the record for career wins in Quebec, which, by the way, World Tour race, huge firepower in the start list every year. You like back in the day, you get guys like Sagan and Van Avermaet always at this race, and now you get guys like Pogačar. So this is a big race to have won 3 times. This is a big deal. And he clearly knows what he's doing, because he was able to bide his time, let Bahrain do the work, mostly to chase down that last move. It was Bahrain that I think kind of, I don't want to say masked at the front, but they had a guy who was chasing down Pogačar and the 3 Lotto riders. And then I said he bided his time, but then he sort of like didn't bide his time. Then he was like, okay, I know I need to go now. And the funny thing is, watching this happen, it's like the whole 30 seconds, you're like, clearly he's going too early. And like you said, you're just waiting. You're waiting for them to come around him, and they don't. They don't come around him. They weren't even close. So he knew what he was doing. And I think had I not seen the result, had I not heard his post-race quotes, I would have expected to be here talking to you, Cosmo, about how Michael Matthews just totally went too early, tactical error. Obviously, that's not what happened.
No. It's cool to see kind of the older, not that he's that old. It's cool to see experience kind of come in and be valuable and play a role, like that knowledge. Like you said, like you've been there. You're like, so you watch it on TV, you don't really get the sense of you're coming up from the river to a top of a hill. And it's sort of, you can race bikes, right? And you can look at a profile, you can look at VeloViewer, you can even preview the course. But until you're in a huge group of people, you don't really get a sense for like, this looks like it's going to be hard. It feels hard solo, but in a group, it's really easy. Like you get carried along really well. Or, this seems like it's too early to sprint, but because it's so hard to move up this group in this sprint, like this is actually the right moment to go. And you see so many people, like people are really young now. Like we're constantly reminding people, hey, Alaphilippe is only 32. Like he's not that old.
Right.
Because the top riders now are so young. And I just like it when there is, at least seems to be, a real experience factor at play.
Yeah, Matthews, I mean, to talk about experience and age, he's 33, he's turning 34 at the end of this month. And again, as you say, in this era of Tadej Pogačar and others like him, okay, nobody's like Tadej Pogačar, but other young riders who are so good, 33 going on 34 feels pretty old, but he's really not. I mean, Geraint Thomas showing you can do well into Alejandro Valverde showing you can do well into old age. Like Greg Van Avermaet won his first, I guess, only monument when he was already, early to mid 30s. Yeah. But experience really proved crucial here, because I think Matthews went at the perfect time. And maybe it was that he was in the right position already when other people who might have contested that sprint were not there yet. But this is coming from a guy who has done this before. To me, the big thing, though, the surprising thing even, is that Matthews' last 2 wins, they were back-to-back years, came all the way back in 2018 and 2019. So it had been some time since he had won here. And as recently as 2022, he contested the win. He was second, but, didn't win. And maybe more importantly was in 2023, when Arnaud Delis won, Corbin Strong was second, and Matthews was third. And I feel like that, to me, you can come away from that race, the 2023 edition, feeling like, okay, maybe Matthews' time has passed. Because this race ended in the way that you probably think he would want it to end, this sort of reduced uphill sprint. And not only did he not win, but he was third. He was not even the second best on the day. So he clearly has found some speed again. So maybe there's just something this year that he's just a little bit stronger, because Delis was the guy who, along with Pogacar, was getting a lot of the pre-race hype. And in the end, it was Matthews who came away with a win this year. And yeah, good on him for being able to hold that sprint. It wasn't like the field of sprinters was a slap. I mean, Vinnyam Girmay was second. That's the points champion of the Tour de France. So there's some speed in this finale.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised to see Delis trying to go with the move close to the end of the race, especially after last year when he really demonstrated how well this finish can suit him. Like, he started sprinting from like northern New York just because he was so far down in the group, and like made it, across the border to Canada and up the boulevard and won this race. And to see him kind of like, again, he's feeling really good, obviously. Like, he's had some good results recently. Maybe that was the plan ahead of time. Like, Pogacar goes, just go with him and you'll be able to beat him in a sprint. I don't know. But it seemed like, especially because they had so many other riders like right up there, if they had just not gone, if they had let Alaphilippe, which he does, and they should expect, there's a lot of other guys that are going to go there, but it's not, Bahrain, basically, like you said, didn't really lead the chase so much as put a guy on the front and kind of brought this all back together. And it seems like, from my perspective, a 300-meter sprint like we saw Matthews used to win this race, and like we basically saw maybe even longer Delis do last year to win this race, would have been much more something to his liking. And I'm kind of wondering, was that plan? Did they just go by ear? It just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me based on the information I had coming into the event.
It feels to me like a great example of how Tadej Pogacar can impact a race. It's like, he's there. Okay, Pogacar's with me and my teammates. Then this is the move. And it wasn't. But Pogacar can make it feel that way because he's just such a presence. And he just has such a huge impact on every race he does that I can understand the way that Lotto maybe thought this is what we need to do. We have 3 riders to Pogacar. We're going to stay away, and Delis going to win this easily. And in the end, he obviously didn't.
It brings back our San Remo discussion almost. I remember you and Kaylee being very mad about whether or not it was possible for Tadej Pogacar to win San Remo. And this is sort of a similar thing where this is an event that doesn't really line up well with him on paper, but he still has a massive impact on the race by being there. Right.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I do think that because this is an uphill finish, there is a universe in which he can win. If Rigoberto Urán can win this race, there's a universe in which Tadej Pogacar can win this race. Right?
You know that Tadej Pogacar is going to win San Remo next year, right? Like,
oof, man, that would make me look bad. I hope it does.
It's 1,000% happening. Not obviously, Kaylee and I are always at war. Always.
But you're allied in that
we
front.
made this may be our common ground.
Yeah, I can see that. Looking a little bit further down the top 10, there were some interesting names. Rudy Mollard for Groupama, also showing that 34-year-olds can... He's turning 35 like quite soon, actually, which makes me happy because I am 35. And he finished on the podium. Good for you, Rudy Mollard. And yeah, a little bit further down, you got Nielsen Palace finishing in the top 10. That's great. Luke Lamperty of Soudal Quickstep, who's a rider we've talked about as an up-and-comer, young American talent, just 21 years old, other end of that age spectrum. And showing a fair bit of power here in the finale in Quebec, so that's promising as well. Any other takeaways or highlights from Quebec for you?
No, I was just surprised it was a lot more interesting of a race. I feel like it is kind of the lead-in to Montreal, not to spoil, I guess, the result from GP Montreal, but this to me felt like a more dynamic, kind of thrilling, like easier to show and be exciting kind of event than what we got on Sunday.
The finale certainly was dramatic in a way that the final few minutes of Montreal were not. So, What's your headline from the GP Montreal?
UAE turns one-day classics into Tour de France mountain stages. Is that?
Oh, that's great, because it really did feel that way. I mean,
yeah.
Especially like at the Giro this year, you saw Rafael Majka hit the front really hard, and then it's like, okay, everybody knows what's happening now, and then it happens and nobody can stop it, and that's exactly what happened at Montreal.
Well, the thing we are missing a solid 50 kilometers of Montreal, because the pictures went out around like 110 kilometers to go, came back around 63. So we saw a break go.
Maybe there's drama we don't know about.
Yeah, who knows what happened? But I mean, we was still. I think UAE was already at the front. They were at the front. We came back. UAE really just kind of driving around the course, and instead of guys falling off into the autobus or getting dropped on climbs, they just came through the start finish. Pulled the bike over, stepped off the bike. Michael Matthews, I want to say early. Like, I think he got out of the race about when you would have expected him to get out the race. Arnaud Lee went out too. But as the race went on, UAE had fewer and fewer people up this climb. And then 23K to go, it was just Majka, and Majka went hard, and everybody knew what was happening, right? Like, Matteo Jorgensen was right there on Pogacar's wheel. Alaphilippe was right there on Pogacar's wheel, and Pogacar accelerated, and they both accelerated visibly more slowly. There was a point at which the gap was kind of 2 bike lengths, 3, 4, and then Jorgensen kind of looks over at Alaphilippe. Alaphilippe looks behind him, and there's nobody there. They kind of pull over. That was basically the last time anybody entertained the idea of chasing Pogacar down, finishing anything but second in this race.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Last time anyone entertained doing it, because the gap for so long was not that big.
But he probably could have made it bigger if he had to, right? Like, I feel like at a certain point you get your 30-second gap, and then you settle into something. Like, I don't think he could ride the intensity he rode when he made that 4, 5, 6 bike length gap for more than, probably more than he rode it for. Like, that was probably his like hardest 40, 50 seconds, right? And then he kind of settles back down to threshold, and there's a gap, and it's 25 seconds, it's 30 seconds. But he has no reason to go any harder than like a pace he knows he can sustain for the rest of the race, right? He's not he gets no points for having a big time gap. So I think he could have made the gap. He could have blown it out further, but this was like the safe distance.
The interesting thing to me, though, is that I wonder, with like 20K to go, on the commentary, I think it was Brian Smith who said that it felt like it was basically game over at that point, but he only had like 20 seconds. And any other rider with a whole lap to go at Montreal, there's a whole ascent of the Chameleon Ode, sorry, French speakers, my best attempt, climb. Any other rider with just 20 seconds, that's not going to hold. And yet, with Pogacar, both his power and that old aura of invincibility mean that the rest of the riders in the race weren't really collaborating with each other to try to chase him down. I don't know if they could have, but they didn't really try.
It's such a low percentage shot, right? Like, maybe he has salmonella poisoning and no one's figured it out. Or maybe he like dropped all his gels and didn't get any more gels, and he's totally, he's this close to bonking. If someone just makes him go super hard again, man with a hammer comes and bangs his legs off. Like, that, we probably 1 in 100 odds of that happening. But
I bet it's shorter than that. I feel like it's got to be short. 20 seconds, and there's still a whole climb to go, like a big climb. The Chameleon is a big climb. It's like 2K.
Who is going to step up and be like, yeah, I'm going to throw a potential good result away for this exceptionally long chance that maybe I will get across to Pogacar and he will fall apart and I'll win this bike race.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think the chance is trying to bridge. And that's what everyone was attempting to do. Everyone was trying to bridge. And I think what you need is teammates. And maybe there just weren't enough of those to be able to make that happen.
I don't know if I completely agree. I think we saw a lot of people make flyers, like attacks where they broke clear from a group, because I think the group they thought they were in was too big. I think they looked around and saw a bunch of people, some of whom, clearly weren't going to be helpful in any way, except they would just sit on their wheel. And they tried really to break clear and see who could go with them and form a group, because we saw that. We saw that after I think it was Paulus took a big flyer around 18K to go. And then Alaphilippe went around 15K and he got clear with Jorgensen, Aran Baru, and Peo Bilbao. And they actually worked together pretty well for about 5 kilometers. They weren't chasing Pogacar down because he's Pogacar, but they were definitely opening up a viable gap over the group around, about 10K to go, 11K. It was single-digit Ks to go. I think we saw Bilbao go to the front, and then Jorgensen cracks. And then Bilbao basically just rides the other guys off his wheel. Like they've all worked together. He got his money's worth out of that collaboration. Solid in for second.
I think the only possible team that maybe can do something here would be Visma. They had 3 riders, I think, in that group. They had Lemon, they had Jorgensen. You could have put Lemon and Tish Benoot to work for Jorgensen, or Lemon and Jorgensen to work for Tish Benoot. Otherwise, I think the team comp was too spread out across multiple teams, and that's why you got this bridge attempt situation that we got.
I mean, even with 3 guys, are you going to put 3 guys in the front of the peloton and try to chase really hard to get Pogačar back? Because with 3 guys,
I feel like it's the only real chance to get him. I mean, otherwise you're just settling for second.
No one else is going to pull. You're just going to be setting your dudes on fire, and then it's going to still be a 30-second gap to Pogačar, except everyone on your team is tired. Yeah, I guess that's possible.
I guess you maybe don't make up any ground. But I would think that with Bart Lemon and Tish Benoot, or Bart Lemon and Jorgensen working all out, there's a chance. I mean, again, 20 seconds. That's all the gap.
I think they could have done some like trading off attacks where they had one guy go and come back, and the other immediately have the next guy go. Where they could have broken a small group off like we saw, but I think it's the same result, right? Like unless you have somebody who can beat this second tier of non-Pogačar guys in a classics finale like this, which they probably have with Jorgensen if he isn't real tired from trying to chase Pogačar when he attacks.
Yeah, Jorgensen went all in on that climb, and I think that hurt him. I don't know that he would have caught him. I don't know that it makes a big difference, but yeah, I feel like his weekend, he looked stronger than the final results indicate, because in Quebec, he was a real animator in that finale, finished 35th. In Montreal, he came closest to catching Pogačar when Pogačar went 12th. Neither one of those results really indicates just how strong Jorgensen was on the day, but at least he tried. There's something to be said for that. I don't. As I've just said, I don't know that it was the best tactic, but it was an attempt. At the end of the day, we said this after Strada. We said this at Liège. Nothing probably matters because Pogačar is just so good. A hilly classic. There's maybe a Remco Evenepoel can give him a run for his money, but other than that, there's a pretty small number of riders who can match him on this kind of course. These kinds of sustained gradients. The climbs at Montreal are not super steep, but over the course of the day, they really add up. And I think it really favors Pogačar. I mean, obviously it favors Pogačar. He's won it already, so this was his second win. And in the end, talk about results not really showing the accurate picture. His gap of, what was it, like 24 seconds was not...
I mean, he was sitting up, he was high-fiving everybody.
Yeah, he was like taking it easy, enjoying himself.
Got a big high five from Michael Matthews, who is still standing on the side of the course.
Which was great. Matthews DNF'd, so he was there to...
Yep.
Yeah, in the end, Pogačar crushed. Pello Bilbao second, great result for Bilbao. He's still kind of knocking on the door of a big-time one-day win. He has had quite a few big stage racing stages in his career, but has not yet gotten that big one-day win, Pello Bilbao. And then Julian Alaphilippe, nice to see him on the podium. I think...
We should talk a little bit about that sprint, because that's maybe the most exciting part of the race.
Yeah, the sprint for third. How did that play out?
It was one of those. Everyone is super tired and flinging what remains of their human form at the finish line. I think, kind of watching it from the always deceptive head-on finish camera, every second and a half, you thought a different guy was going to win the sprint. It wasn't actually that close. I think Alaphilippe was up by about a bike length, but I mean, Tom Scoinch was in the mix. Yann Izagirre, Tish Benoot, Michael Woods. Maxime Van Hills, everybody really, Alaphilippe was kind of in the middle of a row of like 5 people. And he was, like I said, most of a bike in front of them, but there's a big throw at the line and you couldn't immediately tell who had won. I think it's actually a finish style that works well for Alaphilippe because it doesn't involve a lot of thinking. And not that he doesn't think well, but he's a man who races races on impulse, right?
Well, a guy who's been that good at winning Flèche Wallonne is going to like any race that ends in an uphill sprint. If it's an uphill sprint for third, that's probably less of a good thing for him than for the win.
I mean, he did a lot of work earlier in the race, right? He was not at 100% freshness, and a finish like this works well because everybody's already beat up too, and also because it is just that very much like reactive, I'm going to pedal hard right now, and it's going to be the right time because the spirit tells me so. And yeah.
Maxime Van Hills was fourth. Another strong showing from him after quite a bunch of them earlier this year in the spring. And then he won Eschborn Frankfurt. I mean, he's had a nice year for Lotto. And I feel like in terms of outperforming expectations, Jan Zagiri finishing fifth in that style of finish, I don't usually think of him as being somebody with a kick. And he outkicked Mike Woods on home turf. Well, as home turf as Quebec can be for the...
Which part of Canada is he from? Manitoba or something? I feel like he's from the plains.
Michael Woods, born...
Probably Ottawa. Everyone's from Ottawa.
East York, Toronto, Canada, says the internet.
Toronto, okay. Big Ottawa.
So not
that is the
not
sound
Quebec.
of all our Canadian fans unsubscribing.
According to Wikipedia, this is great. His first sport was ice hockey, and his childhood ambition was to play as a left wing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Thanks, Wikipedia. That's a great little nugget.
Leafs.
Not Leafs. Right. So, Montreal, Tadej Pogacar did what everybody thought he was going to do. Well, honestly, I didn't expect him to go that far out, but in the moment, it was pretty clear it was going to happen because Micah hit the front, and it's like, oh, I've seen this before. And he did what you knew he was going to do, and nobody could do anything about it. Quite a showing of form exactly 2 weeks before he attempts to win the Triple Crown and become the first man since Stephen Roche to do it in Switzerland. We'll have plenty more of that on that, obviously, as that approaches. But I got to say...
Trying to steal Stephen Roche's soul factoid.
Yeah, poor guy.
I shouldn't say soul factoid, but it's like the
factoid
that everybody goes to for Stephen Roche.
It's a big one. I mean, it's a good factoid.
The name Triple Crown may have just been invented so that they could give it to Stephen Roche. Yeah, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if it's just the Giro and the Tour, but not the Vuelta and Worlds, right?
Well, it makes sense when people like Haley Fretz disrespect the Vuelta because the true Triple Crown, right, should be all three Grand Tours. Whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Pogacar, though, based on what he showed us in Montreal, I mean, he's going to be the favorite for Worlds. He's gonna have the skill set. It's going to suit him very well. And the Slovenian team, I mean, you think about Team UAE and the way they bossed this race today, and you wonder, well, can Slovenia do that? Because they're obviously a very different squad.
It's a very interesting team that they're sending to Worlds.
Yeah, it is. And it includes Primoz Roglic, who is obviously quite good. And Pogacar's teammate Domen Novak, who did some hard work today in Montreal, will be there because he also is Slovenian. So I think they'll have a stronger team than you might expect at Worlds. Yeah, Pogacar looking great for Worlds. That's got to be the big takeaway from this weekend. And yeah, let's take a break. All right, let's go around the league. We're not going to do full-on how the races were won, but we did have some other racing happening this weekend, the big ones being the European Continental Championships, where Tim Merlier took the title on the men's side for Belgium, and on the women's side, Lorena Wiebes wins it for the Dutch. Big takeaways from the weekend for you, Cosmo?
Italy, not a good weekend for them leading out. They were really kind of the I want to say dominant, but they were dictating the lead out in both races, and in both races their sprint didn't really fully materialize, and they didn't win.
Yeah, they achieved essentially nothing for their efforts in the men's race. At least they got second with Elisa Balsamo in the women's race.
It was definitely like Wiebes, everybody else, Balsamo.
A very distant second.
Belgium deploying the seldom seen dual sprinter lead out was interesting to see for sure. They had one or two guys working for Jasper Philipsen and one or two guys working for Tim Merlier. And Tim Merlier had a real canny sprint where it's just, I think a lot of people were kind of looking for Italy to launch, for Jonathan Milan to launch, and he didn't. And, again, you had this kind of spread across the road, and Merlier was already accelerating behind it, kind of zipped around the outside, didn't even bump in anybody, and won pretty handily.
Sort of a weird few weeks for Philipsen. He did take a stage win at the Renouille Tour, but he also finished second twice to Milan there. He was seventh at the Cyclistes Classics, not even on the podium of the Continental Championships. I'm aware that all of our listeners are going to say, who cares? He's Jasper Philipsen. He cares about monuments and tour stage wins. Probably true, but I also think you
get a fancy jersey.
Wanted to do it better.
You get a fancy jersey if you win.
It's a great jersey too. I love the colors. And yeah, I mean, if they're going to give him a couple of lead out riders, you might expect him to do better. Meanwhile, Mads Mikkelsen of Estonia coming in third. Holy cow. What a performance by the 21-year-old.
The crazy part is that Phillips actually looked over, and like, after he was clearly not going to win the sprint, decided he had enough margin to finish third, or maybe that he just didn't care anymore. But like, knew that Mikkelsen was there, and like still did a pretty kind of like bike throw, and Mikkelsen took third over him. Like, I don't know. I mean, I could see a guy like Phillips being like, well, if I'm not going to win it, who cares?
Who cares?
It was still very much like, Jasper, what's up, bud? Head in the game. Come on.
Yeah, and as for the women's race, Wiebes and Balsamo, we've had some great battles from them both for quite a while now, and it's just great to see them going back and forth, and it's nice to see them both winning depending on the day. I think Wiebes has had a heck of a run lately, but Balsamo won quite a few races earlier in the year. Yeah, it's a great rivalry that we get there. And meanwhile, over in Italy, Mark Hirschi is like winning everything right now. And
Mark Hirschi,
he has now,
believe, is actually like the head of Italian Parliament as a result of his recent wins.
It's deserving. I feel like he should be.
Yeah.
He has won 5 pro races in a row. 2 of those, the first 2 are World Tour, by the way, including the San Sebastian, which is a big deal. So he won San Sebastian, the Bretagne Classic, aka Plouay, and then over the last week, he won GP Industria and Artigianato, the Gran Premio Città de Peccioli, and the Memorial Marco Pantani. So clearly in great form, ahead of Worlds. On home soil, he'll have one more stage race before Worlds happens, the Tour de Luxembourg, where, based on recent results.
Famously won by podcaster Lance Armstrong in 1998.
Famously also won by none other than Mark Hirschi last year. So he's the defending champion. Gotta assume he's going to do it again, and it's going to be cool to see at Worlds a rider that he gets.
Thing at Worlds, though, the last time he raced a race and didn't win, he was racing with the Swiss team at the Olympics. And at Worlds, racing with the Swiss team again.
Fair point. And the interesting dynamic is that the big favorite for Worlds is a rider that is normally on his team. But because Switzerland and Slovenia are different countries, they get to race against each other at Worlds. Should be exciting to see Mark Hirschi versus Pogacar on terrain that suits both of them. Also suits Remco Evenepoel as well, and a couple of other riders. We'll have plenty more on that coming up. Anything else, Cosmo?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. I've enjoyed watching North American racing. This brief moment in time that we get every year when they come over to Canada. Love it. And next on the docket, Worlds TTs and then Worlds road race.
We're not doing Tour of Luxembourg
for more.
We don't have a Tour of Luxembourg
we'll
show.
Talk about it.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
We'll talk about it.
All right.
Mark Hirschi will dominate, and then what will we even have to say?
The jinx that you're putting out right now is just...
And I shouldn't jinx him because he's on that fake team I drafted, so I want him to do well. Right. Well, hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed all the racing. Hope you have a chance to watch the upcoming races like the Tour of Luxembourg, the Grand Prix de Wallonie, and the other pre-Worlds tune-ups. We'll be back next week. And all those pre-Worlds tune-ups. Make sure you head on over to escapecollective.com. Check out all our coverage of, everything happening right now. Not just bike racing, but everything. We got so many great stories over there this week. And we'll be back. And we'll see you then. Until then, I'm Dane Cash. And who are you? What was this?
I'm Cosmo Catalano. And that was the How the Race Was Won podcast.